else in the world. After all, with 930 million people connected to the internet, and with their basic needs, which once upon a time was a stress that would pass from generation to generation. There was a time in India when for generations people would be struggling with food, clothing, shelter, healthcare, education, the need for basic water, electricity. Now in today's context, I would add digital connectivity to that. These basic needs kept people engaged through their lifetime. In the last 10 years, our effort has been a complete saturation of every person, every child, every family in the country, so that nobody is deprived of these basic needs. Once you are confident that all of these are well taken care of, it empowers you to think big, to dream big, to aspire for all the good things of life. And I think that's why I often say that India has the 4D advantage. Democracy, the rule of law, which gives investors comfort that they will not be discriminated against. They'll have a fair deal, they'll have recourse to law. Demographic dividend, they're one of the world's youngest large population, expected to continue to be young for the next 3 decades. Our average age is 29 years or thereabouts. And this young aspirational India on their mobile phone connected with the world, both adding to economic activity and to demand for goods and services. The demand that 1.4 billion people generate itself is a big attraction for investment. And finally, decisive leadership that Prime Minister Narendra Modi offers, where he can bite a bullet, he can take a firm decision, he can take the country forward, who's earned the trust of the world as a leader who's looked upon by almost everybody as a senior statesman. He's probably the only leader in the democratic world who's got a 3rd term in office. The last 2 years, the kind of churn we have seen. Almost every country, governments have changed, except India. Think about it. I don't recall another large democracy where there's not been a change of government in the last 2 years. And significant change. I mean, you look at UK, it went from one end of the pendulum to the other. Who had expected all the 7 swing states in America voting the way they did? It's happening in France, it's happening across Europe. It happened in South Africa. The democratic world is going through a churn. In that, an oasis of stability can be experienced through decisive leadership and popularity of Mr. Modi. And therefore, friends, I believe that this is India's time. The delta of opportunity that we offer as we grow towards becoming a developed nation, a prosperous nation in the next 23 years, from a $3.5 trillion economy to a $35 trillion economy by 2047, is probably the world's greatest business opportunity today. You lose out, you miss out at your own peril and cost. Therefore, I invite all of you, don't miss the bus. Thank you very much.
Thanks a lot, Mr. Goyal, for a lot of that. I'll allow questions to assemble, but I'll have a few of my own. Firstly, 2 things that we at CLSA are doing. We've moved from 4 Ds to 7 Ds on India, and that's actually something that we've been marketing for the last 4 or 5 months very aggressively. And there are a few Ds that maybe I'll share our presentation with you, and which I think you're missing. There are not many Ds which are there, and one of them that you spoke about was discipline, and I'll come to that. The other thing, since you mentioned about Mumbai infrastructure, very happy to tell you that just before we started this forum, on a Sunday, it was a busy Sunday for us. I know it was a very busy Sunday for you with the last day of election campaigning. We had a bus full of clients showing some of those things that you mentioned, and they were all very, very happy. So I mean, it's something that we've been marketing pretty aggressively, and everybody came out very impressed from that. think one of the things that you mentioned, and this is something that we have highlighted, Forex reserves and accumulation of that, the way we measure it even more effectively rather than the absolute number is in terms of months of imports. And in one of the analysis that we've done, in terms of months of imports, Forex reserves for India has gone up the highest amongst the top 19, 20 markets in the world. So that's the part on discipline. Our leverage is much more under control. So related to that, and a few cues from what you mentioned.
Interrupt for a moment.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you for the other Ds, but I look forward to that. That will make my next engagement even more exciting for me. And that's why I said I love coming to CLSA. I learn a lot. I just want to correct this Forex reserve story. And maybe CLSA or some economists would like to delve deeper into it. And please get back to me if what I'm saying gets validated or I'm flawed in my thinking. The India story is not typical to what any other country's story is. So when you look at the number of months import, I think it's completely flawed. Pardon me. I've been arguing that with many policymakers. India has 3 or 4 unique situations. One, we are the world's largest recipient of remittances. Last year it was, I think, $125 billion. And it's growing every year. Even during COVID, when one could have thought remittances will fall, it continued to grow. So that's a very stable pool of money coming into the country, irrespective of anything else. One must factor that in when you're looking at number of months import, because a good part of our import gets covered by that. Second, and I'm happy to do a study in my ministry and give you some more inputs or give that to the world. A lot of our imports are directly correlated to our exports. So when you look at the number of months import, you need to calibrate that if we are importing, let's say, $30 billion of gems and jewels, which are directly adding value here and being exported, or the $37 billion of petroleum products, of which $30 billion is imported as crude oil, or the 17 billion of electronic mobile phones that we are going to export, of which $10-12 billion of imported components are coming. When I factor that in, I find that there are only 3 or 4 things where we are really import dependent. Edible oil, the palm oil and all of that comes into the country. Crude oil, of course, about, let's say, 130 billion or so of crude oil coming into the country. Coking coal, required for the huge amount of steel that we produce, and we'll continue to grow that industry as the demand in India is very robust. Coking coal, little bit of thermal coal for the port-based coal plants, though I think we have enough coal in India, we could at some stage even do away with that. Coking coal, edible oil, the crude oil. If you want to be very conservative, you can add some gold, because the glitter of gold attracts a lot of Indians. You can put in a $30-40 billion or $50 billion of gold, not a problem. So if one looks at the India import basket, you'll find there's not much. We are food secure now, except pulses and edible oils. Only 2 items. The rest, we are all absolutely in the surplus category. Our export of marine and food products was $55 billion last year. Much more than our import of edible oil and pulses. So bottom line is, and the best way to assess it is during COVID, the world was worried what will happen to the India story. We landed up with a trade surplus. And lastly, our services exports. And this you may or may not consider. I'm not getting into that. But our services exports are giving us a significant, increasingly growing surplus. So if I have a trade deficit of $250-300 billion, almost 175 or 200 billion get made up by service export. So the net current account deficit is still in the 1% of GDP category, which I don't think is a matter which is serious enough to be concerned.
No, in fact, what I was saying was the picture, even with months of imports, is so strong.
12 months.
Correct. And if you make it just current account deficit or trade deficit, it will even appear stronger. So the discipline aspect has been very clear. But what I also want to understand is incrementally, since over the last 10 years and particularly the last 5 years, the focus on infrastructure and investments has been so strong. Now is this the time when you believe that government has done the heavy lifting on capex, and this is a time when private guys, which possibly is the time for them to come in, and we need to continue to focus more on discipline? Is that how we view things?
No, the discipline focus should continue irrespective. But with the buoyancy we see, the increasing tax revenues, with the growing economy, I think a discipline can be coupled with government investments in infrastructure for at least another decade or so. And we would invite private sector investments to come in and monetize some of this government investment. We won't make a loss, something like what Tim Geithner did in the global financial crisis. It ended up making a profit for the US Fed. So I think infrastructure investments for us also are not a loss in any way. I'll give you a small example which will shock you. You went through the Atal Setu? This 22-kilometer bridge. Can any of you imagine, this was first conceptualized in 1962. Sadly, governments came and went. For 50 years they did a damn all about it. It was only in 2014 when we got Mr. Modi at the center and BJP, my party's chief minister in the state, Devendra Fadnavis, whom many of the Mumbaikars would seem to like, I think. Both of them working in alignment to understand Mumbai's problems. In 14 started opening out the old data and the maps and everything. 16, the foundation stone was laid. 18, the project was started. Sadly, we had a little bit of a blip. For 2.5 years, the project was slowed down for various reasons. I won't get into that. And then we again gave it a fill-up, and 2024, earlier this year, maybe January, February, I don't recall now, this was opened up. So it's not as if this has taken long to build also. 18 to 24 with 2 years of slow work is effectively 4, let's say 5 years is what it has taken us to build this. Which, just imagine for a moment, if this was built in the 60s or even the 70s, the amount of growth Mumbai could have experienced, that whole mainland would have opened up. The Mumbai-Pune economic corridor would have been at another level today, beating the New York-Boston corridor maybe. And with the coastal road, I represent all the north of Mumbai, the border, northern border of Mumbai, as a member of parliament. From my constituency, in the one end of Mumbai, one would be able to go all the way to Pune in 2 hours. Now that can transform this entire corridor, and therefore we are also setting up a smart industrial city along the way at Dighi. We are going to build all the interconnectivity. The airport is coming up there. That whole region is going to open up a plethora of opportunities. I think the future will need the government to continue to focus on infra investments. Whether we need to continue to grow the way we are or not can be a matter of debate. But private sector would benefit significantly if they are looking for long-term returns and stable returns on infrastructure.
Sure. And one thing that you also, since you mentioned this anecdotally, yesterday our first speaker or the speaker around the same time, he started from Kandivali at 8:15 and he's budgeting enough time to reach for the 10 o'clock presentation. He was here in 25 minutes. He was like, this is not what I imagined. I was dreading the travel and this was like a breeze. So
I came to my home in about 11 or 12 minutes from Naples, 12 minutes.
And so one thing
that time I was struggling with farmers' issues.
So one thing that you did mention, and let me just try and bring it up in a different way. With technology and with digital adoption that we've seen in India, there is bound to be disruption for certain sectors. Now, here is a big live debate that we see. There is a big gig economy which is coming, and there's of course an old mom and pop store kind of employment which is there. So how do we try and balance this kind of disruption which is kind of natural to happen with technology?
I think it's in the mind, whether you're looking at it as a disruption or as an opportunity. COVID showed the world that India has the ability to convert crisis into opportunity. And all of these things, whether it's artificial intelligence and the associated change in the way we do business, the way we live, is in fact one of the greatest opportunities that India is offering to the world today. For example, data centers. Now, data centers require a lot of reliable power. I dare say we are the only country most suitable for data centers across the world. 3 reasons. One, in 2014 when Mr. Modi became Prime Minister, I used to be the power minister. One of the first tasks he gave me was to interconnect the entire national grid. At that point of time, power was available in North India at that point of time, 3 cents. And the same time, same day, power was available in South India at about 16 cents. That was the gap, almost 5 times. One of the first things we did was we invested, I think, probably close to $30 billion, but interconnected the entire national grid. So we have a robust grid of 500 gigawatt today, of which 200 gigawatt is clean energy. Our plan to expand clean energy is to 500 gigawatt by 2030, and we'll have almost 1,000 gigawatt national grid at that point of time. Now, where else in the world can you tap into a high tension line with 1,000 gigawatt in it? It's the most reliable power you can get. And I've heard of countries which are claiming that we are going to set up data centers where we'll inject power from one place into the grid, and it will be assumed that that is green power and that is dedicated to the data center. I think that's pretty much, it's open to question, let's say, use a little more diplomatically polite word. But what India can offer is actually 24/7 green power. Some of our companies are offering at as low as 5 cents or 6 cents. 24 hours green power dedicated to your project as a mix of solar, wind, pump storage, some hydro, and possibly battery. Right, the last bid went for 4 rupees 61 paise if I remember correctly. So India is offering you land, is offering you a mix of various clean energies, is offering you the world's largest number of STEM graduates coming out of college. By the way, 43% of them are girls. 43% of our STEM graduates are women. Therefore, we talk about women-led development. And a lot of the work in 10 years has been focused on empowering our women folk. If they come into the formal workforce, the economy can grow by leaps and bounds. And I'm one of those optimists who sees a double-digit growth in the economy and an appreciating rupee in the years to come.
So this is the advantage of having you, because you've seen so many ministries and so many important ministries in the last 10 years up close. But kind of just coming to the more consumer kind of question, which is what I was kind of getting on to. If you look at, say, the old kind of retail and some of these new e-commerce companies and kind of getting the gig workers to come and deliver and all of that, there is a natural kind of a move which is happening. So how, in terms of your policy making, how do you think of making this kind of, managing this kind of a change?
I think as long as they all stick to the rule of the law of the land is very clear about foreign direct investment in any e-commerce. I have been repeatedly talking about this subject, that every e-commerce company should respect the law of the land, both in letter and spirit. If you read today morning's paper, it opens up a lot of people to question.
Sure, sir. And maybe just if there are any questions, you can raise your hand. I'll just continue with one last question from my side, and then we can take questions from the floor. So, just in terms of how we've seen some of these new elections, the recent elections come in, is this a little bit of a change in thinking or an involvement in thinking from the government on the side of also thinking of consumption-linked policy making, as compared to the last tenure, which was very, very investment focused? Is that the way policy making is also moving towards?
I think change is a constant in life, and we are a very listening government. We respect all the various views that we often get from the market, from policy, from economists, from those who understand what is best for the country and the countrymen, and we act and respond to that very quickly, which is why we've been quite agile in policy making. I, for one, certainly believe that we need to look at real wages growing. We need to look at rejigging the kind of work our young people are doing. The next generation is not going to be doing the same kind of work what our generation did. Respecting that, we've been promoting things like Startup India and encouraging youngsters to become entrepreneurs, to come up with innovative ideas, helping them get funding for it, whether through the private sector or even through government-sponsored funds. We are encouraging through a new education policy, the National Education Policy 2020, our children also to get out of the mindset of a government job or get out of the mindset of a structured degree course or a degree that you need to have into exploring the world. So I think liberal education is coming into the country. We are inviting foreign universities to come into India, looking at dual degrees, looking at a new way of thinking. And our young children are responding very admirably to that.
Sure. I just open the floor for questions. There is one over here, and if there are any, please raise your hand. I'll just have the mic, one over there as well.
Good morning, Mr. Goel. Thanks for coming to investment conferences. I've heard you before, and thanks for doing that. I'm sorry, if you don't mind my first question, if I can ask a political question. You have been, canvassing on the ground here in Mumbai and rest of Maharashtra. If you don't mind, if you can just give us some picture about, you also mentioned that you are hoping to win in this election. Why
not hoping, I'm confident we are winning.
Well, my best wishes to your party. And so if you don't mind, can you take
I mean, the way you're saying it, are you a voter in Mumbai? Or?
I am.
You are, so I'm getting worried.
Sir, why do you think you would win, if you don't mind, baseball? And the second question, sir, if I may, is that what would be your plans for Maharashtra in the next government, which I hope you'll be able to form? For the rest of Maharashtra, we did hear a bit about the western Maharashtra. But for the rest of the Maharashtra, what are the plans for the government?
Well, first of all, I think we will win because very clearly, even if you see the Lok Sabha results, the central election results, the difference was only about 200,000 votes between the opposition, which got more number of seats than us, and us. 200,000 in a state with probably 80 million people voting, right? Or 80 million voters, I don't recall how many voted, maybe about 50 million had voted or so. Second, a lot of people, particularly those like you and me, did not come out to vote last time for 3 or 4 reasons. One is, it was very hot. 2, the elections were held on a Monday, particularly in Mumbai, let's say, for example, and many other parts of the state, it was on a Monday. So they were long weekend. 3, there was a feeling Mr. Modi is going to win, so my vote doesn't matter. 4, it was summer vacation, and a lot of people had gone back. It's a traditional thing in India, in Maharashtra, to go back to your village or go back to your hometown. And we saw a significant dip in the voting percentage. And lastly, the election commission, with some new changes that they had brought in, the time being taken for each vote to be cast was so long that we had huge lines of voters across the state. This was a complaint. And in that heat, if you stand in a line too long, a lot of youngsters at least were going back without voting. I did a lot of analysis in my own election. Even though I won with the highest margin in the state of Maharashtra, I was still concerned that why was it only 357,000 votes? Should have been more. But when we did the analysis, we found that if some of these were not there, we could easily have got 100,000 votes more. And this time around, the weather is good, and I've been campaigning last 3 weeks. I think the weather is just perfect. Second, the Election Commission is on record to say that they have significantly improved the facilities. All my people are on the ground today looking, inspecting at those facilities. Third, it's a Wednesday, so no combined long weekend. Fourth, a lot of people are regretting they didn't go out to vote last time. They feel they let down Mr. Modi for all the good work he has. And I see that, I can palpably see that sense on the ground. So my own judgment is that particularly in places like Mumbai, Pune, Nagpur, you will see a significant change in the voting percent. There were some concerns that were being highlighted about divisive vote politics. There was an effort to divide people on the basis of caste or on language, which I think has failed pretty miserably. People of Maharashtra are smart. They may not get now divided the way it looked like probably a month ago or 2 months. There may be some people who may end up being influenced by appeals being made on religious ground, which is a sad state of affairs. I can't do anything about it. But that has a limited appeal. So all of Mumbai that may appeal in 2 or 3 seats out of 36. But then there's always a counter reaction to that also. I've been as diplomatically polite as I can, but you've understood what I'm trying to say. So all in all, my sense is that people want progress and prosperity to continue in Maharashtra. They have seen all the good work that's happened. And we are going to the people with a positive agenda of giving speed and wings to the development journey of Maharashtra.
Any other questions? There's one over there. Okay. Can we have, so there's one over here. Okay. We'll have all the questions together, then someone's going to respond together.
Check my memory also.
So, my question is more on the financial side of this.
Thank you.
I am the salesperson who services the FI investors, and when I meet them very often, they kind of complain or rue that because India is doing so well and they want to invest into India, but most of the time it takes a very long time for them to open accounts in India. The time span ranges from 6 to 8 months just to get their money into the country. And that happens in a global space, 6-8 months, the mood changes. Sometimes the investment
Sometimes it can change for the better also.
Better also, but sometimes the idea, and India relatively is an expensive, valuation-wise, and an expensive country, and it keeps going expensive because we are doing quite well. So this is a very, very pertinent, thing that we need to address when we want more investments into India.
And I think there's one question with Chetan as well.
Sorry, just to add, so I'm Chetan from Templeton, and we get in a lot of clients coming in, and most of our mandates are emerging market mandates, and the only one market which doesn't open on day one is India. So what happens is, it forces us to make investments in other markets, and then we just keep waiting. We probably go and buy some ADRs, and try to play India, but it actually changes everything, and we try to make
Similar issue.
Yeah, similar issue. So that's the other issue I wanted to raise was about education. So India has 15 or 20 million children being born every year, or thereabouts, and we have a lot of talent, and that's basically coming up in the top 1 million people or whatever. But there are 14 million people who have to be thought out as well. So what are we doing to make them employable? The gig economy is one, but I think we need a lot more training on certification, skilling, which is not happening. So just your comments on that as well.
Any other questions? Because the minister said that he's going to check his memory. So.
Quick one, of course, we are doing very well as a country, largely, but if you look at more on the near-term basis, one of the pushbacks that I hear, and I'm running sales for India for CLSA, is that, where is the growth? It's not coming up in numbers. So what would be your reaction to that?
Numbers is it not?
Numbers as in, more on the, the company performance and the growth, like the consumer sector is down to low single digit growth and on the top line, and then lots happening on the middle and the profits.
Great. And
One more, I think.
Sorry, one last question. You mentioned something that struck me at the beginning. You talked about the perception in the past was that the currency would not be stable, and the currency has now held up during difficult market times. For markets, we have to look at the difference between perception and reality, and that's where money is often made. I'm curious for you as a leader within the country, where do you see the perception hasn't caught up to the changing reality, something where you feel things are fundamentally different, but when you speak to investors, other ministers, people just are thinking of describing today like it's the past, but it's actually changed. That's what I'm curious where you see people, the conversation is actually in the past, reality has moved on. What's the big gap between perception and reality?
thank you. To the first question on bringing the money in, I think India has benefited from being a cautious country to attract foreign investment. There's never been a charge on India that we got bad money into the country. We are also very conscious that we have a little bit of a liberalized way to move money out. So companies can move out, I think, 4 times their net worth out of the country to invest in other countries or invest in other projects across the world. Individuals can send out $250,000 and we have a large population. There's a large number of millionaires in the country. So therefore, one of the reasons we have been successful is we made sure that money coming into the country is not hot money. Money is not being round-tripped, that it goes out from India and comes back into the stock market and heats up the market or any other business. And I think possibly there may be some bureaucratic hurdles also, which I would love to hear from you. Then I can talk to the Honorable Finance Minister and other regulators to see how we can bring that time down. Love to see CLSA come up with a paper or Templeton come up with a paper. I think your CEO or your chairman met me in Saudi last month. And I think she also raised this issue, if I remember correctly. I'd love to, and she was to send me a note, I haven't still received it. So do let us know what the whole process is, where you think, keeping the sanctity of, hot money not coming in or money not getting round trip. These are our basic concerns. We'd love to speed up the process. We are very concerned about KYC and we are very concerned about our international reputation as the country of choice for foreign investors to come. So please do send me a note. My colleague is here and he'll give you his coordinates. But whatever I can do to speed that up within this boundary, I think we'll be happy to examine. That is a part of ease of doing business. But just to try and get money in quickly the way you want it on day one, I suspect it will not happen. The way it can happen though is if you can influence the American SEC, Fed or whatever, SEC and the European regulators to accept Indian companies who are cleared by SEBI to invest in the US. We could look at an MRA or a mutual recognition agreement or a mutual arrangement by which both sides can accept each other's licenses. It can't be a one-way traffic. Gone are those days that India works, that the American system is very good and we will accept it in India, but the Indian system will be open to scrutiny in America. That is history. Now we work on reciprocity. We've done that with Europe. You've seen that in the last few days. There was a lot of stress and Europe was asking for an unfair kind of a situation which we didn't accept. And I think as an Indian, each one of you should be proud of that. So our focus is going to continue to remain on equality or reciprocity, but maintain the sanctity of money coming into the country. But I'm happy to still look at how we can cut down the KYC process or eliminate some of the unnecessary stuff which delays money coming in. In terms of your second question was skill. The Prime Minister has announced 5 new schemes in the last budget. where we are putting in $30 billion to try and skill and provide jobs to nearly 20 million more people. And the idea is that that's just the beginning. We'll try and see how this works out. I can give you my own example for it. In my constituency, I've only been an MP representing there for 4 months now, 4 or 5 months. We've already started one skill development center along with the Confederation of Indian Industry. It's got artificial intelligence as a course curriculum. It's got hospitality as a course curriculum. It's got cyber security as a course curriculum. We have imported machines for sewing for our young girls or women, which are AI-enabled machines. They've been introduced in the market only 3 months ago. And we are one of the first to bring that into that skill development center. We want to remain abreast with what is most contemporary. And I myself visited the Singapore's ITE. I got the Apparel Skill Development Council chairman to visit there with me. Then he visited a second time to tie up with them. And we are paying them money and doing a collaboration with Singapore to train our people in fashion designing, in becoming sales girls and sales boys with elan, with style, with a better ability to deliver to the customer. So focus of the country, in fact, Skill Development Ministry was not even existed prior to 2014. We started that ministry in 2014 after the new government came. So our focus in the years to come is that we'll give children an opportunity to restrict their formal education to the extent each one desires and quickly move them into their vocation of choice. And that's where we are taking the country forward. We are now allowed CSR funds to be used for skill development. I hope that will also have an impact, skill development, and I think also innovation. For both, we have allowed CSR funds to be used. Over the next 2 or 3 years, this model will be tested out, and I'm sure that it will give good results to the marketplace. So both your points are well taken and respected. I've already answered your question. You had a question about perception and reality. I think it's before that there was your question. Sorry, on quarter se quarter tak. Yeah. Yeah. I'm surprised that your CLSA, right? Very poor understanding of the economy. Pardon me. That's just a light jest. Well, we all know, the world recognizes that post-COVID, there was a bump up in consumer spending. And then we've seen the recessionary conditions worldwide. We've seen the softening of demand where people are seeing 2 wars that don't seem to come to an end. They're seeing the uncertainty which I spoke about in my address of governments changing worldwide. They know that there's policy uncertainty except in India. And therefore there has been almost a global kind of softening of consumer demand. I'm not terribly concerned about the softening that we are seeing in the last couple of quarters. We never plan policy on a quarter-to-quarter basis. It's only the stock market which looks at every result and profit falls by maybe $3 or $4 million. The market valuation falls by some $300 million. I find that very ridiculous. It only shows, I think, a little bit of immaturity of the analysts or the people who come up with the research reports. You have to look at the factors behind it and the long-term trends. And those are the people who make the maximum money. When Rakesh Jhunjhunwala didn't become a top-notch, let's say the Warren Buffett of India, by looking at quarter-to-quarter results of Titan. He was in it in the long haul, and it paid rich dividends. And I can tell you 1 million people, a million would be an exaggeration, I can tell you a lot of people who made a lot of money being in it for the long haul, being smarter than the foreign investors. Pardon me for saying that. And secondly, you seem to miss out on the potential of India. I'll give you one example for all of you to think about during the course of the day. You can even debate it. An auto company comes into India 25 years ago. It invests only $200 million. I've not done the research on the whole 25-year period, but in the last 10 years alone, investment is $200 million, 25 years. India, yeah, you can keep saying it in everybody's ears. But in the last 10 years alone, they've moved out $12 or $13 billion of royalty and dividends. They are still sitting on a market cap of $15 billion. I still don't know how much more money they remitted out in the first 15 years. I don't know how much of component imports they've done from sister companies, subsidiaries, or their suppliers globally into the country in this last 25 years. That could run into another few billions. Only a $200 billion investment. That's why I said the demand and the demographic dividend that India offers is huge. And once you are working at scale, you enjoy the benefits of competitiveness because of economies of scale. And using that competitiveness, leveraging it, you can actually become a global supplier from India. Far more competitive than what you will supply from Europe or America or Japan or other developed countries. So you will gradually see that shift coming into the Indian economy, where more and more people will realize the virtues of investing, producing, leveraging the demand of the country, and then using that competitive edge the economy of scale gets you worldwide. Incidentally, post-COVID, another phenomena which you will like to watch out for is the work from home virtues or learnings. A lot of companies now realize there's no need to fight with the US government to get H-1B visas. So in the last 3 years, 4 years, no company has ever come to me and said they're worried about visas or work permits anywhere in the world. Because a lot of processes which were being done work from home, they'd rather outsource it to a country full of talent and skill like India and enjoy the fruits of affordability, competitiveness. It's good for us because our people, our brains are not getting out of the country. We retain our people in India. They pay taxes in India. They earn us foreign exchange when they export whatever the services they are providing. All these global capability centers or global competency centers, The people who get incomes spend in India. So their consumption demand, the taxes they pay, the foreign exchange, I mean, it's a great story for India. And we are seeing that in the bump up of services exports. And a lot of companies are enjoying the fruits of that in their own bottom line in other parts of the world. So I think that's a story that's emerging. We need to watch out. And that in a way builds into the perception versus reality. A lot of the realities of India are still hidden stories and hidden gems. There are a lot of opportunities which are unknown, which are not yet tapped fully. And that's why when I did the FTA with the EFTA countries, which Sean probably forgot to talk about, he spoke about Australia and UAE. I always look at equity and balance and fair trade when we are doing an FTA. Gone are the days like in the past, we did FTAs which are totally lopsided against India. Or the earlier governments wanted to do an FTA with China, which is what RCEP effectively was. Now we do an FTA with countries where they are transparent and open governments, where economic systems align with ours. We do FTAs which are balanced equitably in countries, both the countries favor. Otherwise, with Switzerland, Norway, Iceland and Liechtenstein, they had nothing to offer me. I was offering them access to a market of 1.4 billion people with a delta of opportunity from 3.5 trillion to 35 trillion. What a remarkable opportunity India is offering to the rest of the world. But they didn't have much to offer me and we were not able to break the ice until we said, okay, if you commit 1 million direct jobs, and 1 million direct jobs means almost 4-5 million total jobs, and $100 billion FDI, not FII, only FDI. So Norwegian pension fund investing in India is not included. And I thought it's good for me. I get $100 billion of foreign direct investment. Any case, Swiss innovation, Swiss technologies are going to run out of steam. Because with $103,000 per capita income, they can never compete in the world markets. So their products will have to be made in a friendly, in a trusted geography to be able to be competitive in the world. And that's where the story lies. If they don't invest $100 billion, I can claw back the benefits I'm giving them. It's the first time an FTA in the world has been negotiated, where without a bilateral investment treaty also, we have agreed to have a $100 billion committed investment, FDI. It's a win-win for both, and therefore we could get an agreement. So I think a lot of perception will change with analysts and researchers doing a deeper dive and attending CLSA conference. Thank you.
So, okay, one last from Chetan, since.
Templeton was one of the first investors and believers in the India story, so I think he deserves one.
Thank you, sir. So just another, just comment. So, China, when it opened up, they bought a lot of brands in the West. Like, for example, General Electric manufacturing of washing machines and all that in the US is actually owned by a Chinese company. The only Indian company which did that was basically Tata's, which bought Jaguar Land Rover. Right? But isn't that something which Indian companies will need to do? Buy these overseas brands which are probably struggling, but they are well reputed, and get Indian manufacturing.
My friend, it's happening in its own way, at its own speed, and will be a business decision. So TVS bought Norton, for example, and they're turning around Norton because they can sense that these racing bikes are having an advantage. Having said that, we find that particularly in Europe, it's very, very difficult to do business. And if sometimes in business you want to restructure, you want to reformulate, you may even want to close down a business, it's near impossible. People talk about ease of doing business in India. I think the biggest stress is the problems of doing business in Europe or in many other parts of the developed world. ArcelorMittal was struggling in many parts of Europe with their business and couldn't do a damn all about it. Tata's have gone through severe stress in UK in the investments they made over there. In fact, it pulled down Tata Motors and Tata Steel after the Chorus and Jaguar buyouts. So I think Indian investors have become very wary. I know one large steel company which was very actively looking at an Italian asset, but when they saw what was happening with ArcelorMittal or some discrimination they were finding between the government's approach to their local investor and to an Indian company, Indians have become a little wary of investing in these geographies. And also imagine the huge Indian demand itself is such a compulsive case that a lot of people, I asked the steel industry, why are imports growing and why are exports going down? A year and a half ago. Now things are turning again. They said the Indian demand is so huge that we can barely fulfill it. So how do we export? And we're getting good pricing. And therefore the world also is exporting to India. With our increased capacities now in the steel industry, and we aspire to produce 300 million tons in the next 5 years, and hopefully more by the time we look at the next target. So I think a lot of people are still looking inward because of the large opportunities in India, but a lot of smart people are picking up buys which are where we get technology or where we get a brand. Those things are happening. A lot of it is unsung. A lot of them are not doing it through their public companies, having seen the experience of some of the acquisitions. A lot of people are doing it through subsidiaries or through private investments. But we will not as a government interfere or try to make that a government-driven policy. It's for the private sector. Thank you.
Sure. So I think the conversation can continue with Mr. Goyal, having seen so many ministries so closely. So what I suggest is maybe
reading that, is that a compliment?
That's a
Are you suggesting?
That's a compliment, sir. You've seen so many ministries so closely. That's why we have so much to ask to you. But thanks for taking out time, and I hope to see you without any gaps. We have this annual event. This is the 27th one, and this time you've come after 5 years, 6 years. sooner. Thanks so much for taking our time. Thank you.